Overlord Volume 4 Chapter 5 The Freezing God Part 1 Ain's headquarters was the same as the place Cocytus used yesterday, the fortress which Aura was building. If one listened closely, one could hear the faint sounds of work in progress coming from the distance. Once they entered the room, the hitherto silent victim suddenly spoke to Ains, "Emo Niog mi, Sayugwoi works. Then, I shall take my leave now, Ains-sama. Thank you for your hard work. Please take care of Nazarik's first floor for me before we get back. Kek Easyarp." Understood. Gate. Victim passed through the door of darkness which Ains had conjured. It led to the first floor of the great underground tomb of Nazarik. After watching that guardian, whose death would activate a powerful movement restriction skill, leave through the gate, Ains turned back to the rest of the room. At the same time, he sensed Aura behind him, her head bowed. It would seem she had done her best to pretty the room up to welcome Ains. It was quite moving to see the signs of her hard work, that could be seen in every corner of the room. However, this room was far plainer than Nazarik. Perhaps Aura felt ashamed of that. It's not like it's that bad. Ains had originally been a plebeian, so he did not really mind. While his room as the master of Nazarik was not a bad thing, sometimes excessive luxury made him feel uncomfortable. He could relax a little in this place, so it was pretty good. I want an 8 tatami room. Maybe I should secretly set one up somewhere. I need to reward my subordinates. I need to tell Aura that I'm pleased with her hard work. People had to thank and rely on others for their hard work in order to succeed. Ains remembered when he had been running an errand at a certain company, and had overheard something from the director's room. He did not know who had said it, but it was a truly wonderful line. It made him think that it was how an ideal superior should be. You need to express the gratitude in your heart. If you don't praise your people, they won't work, something like that. Forgive me for keeping you here, Aura. I am not displeased in the slightest. I am very satisfied with your hard work, and it is the equivalent of Nazarik, because you decorated it for me. Yes. Aura's eyes widened slightly. Ains did not know if that counted as comforting her, but he was out of ideas. All he could do was try and bluff his way through by looking around. The room still smelled of wood. Under normal circumstances, it would have been better to return to Nazarik than stay in this nearly indefensible place. That was because without the application of defensive spells, this location was little more than a house of papier-mâché. On the other hand, this was a very good spot to use oneself as bait to lure out a big fish. It was quite far from the lake, so anyone who could pursue them here, if there were any, would probably be an Yggdrasil player or people of comparable power to them. In other words, this place had been built to take the attack of a powerful opponent. It was dangerous, of course. But Ains felt that one could not seize the tiger's cubs without entering its den. So they still haven't come. Or is it that this operation failed as well? Still, what is that? Aura, a question for you. What is that thing over there? Ains' gaze fell on a white-colored chair within the room. It had a high back and looked very solid. Due to the exquisite craftsmanship that had gone into its construction, it easily qualified as a work of art. Well, as long as one did not dwell on its sole fault. It is a little plain, but it is a throne that was specially made for you. One of the subordinates behind him, Demiurge, confidently responded on Aura's behalf. Having anticipated that, Ains continued asking, and whose bones went into its construction? They came from all sorts of animals. I selected choice bones from griffins and wyverns. I see, is that so? This throne of bone was not furniture from Nazarik, so it was probably something Demiurge had made outside before bringing it here. Also, the throne's construction seemed to use a lot of human or demi-human bones. While it was not stained with blood or flesh, and was completely made out of pure white bones, he still imagined that he could smell the gore. Slightly revulsed, Ains hesitated over whether or not to take a seat on it. However, it would be hard to simply ignore a chair which had been specially made for him. That said, if he had a good reason, it would be a different matter. Ains thought about the matter, and then he suddenly brought his hands together. Shaltir, I believe I said I would punish you earlier? I shall now mete it out. Yes, I shall humiliate you. Yes. Shaltir seemed a little startled at having been mentioned. Kneel there and lower your head. Get on your hands and knees. Yes. Confused, Shaltir went to the place Ains indicated, the center of the room, before getting into a supplicatory position. After moving to Shaltir's side, Ains immediately sat upon her slender back. Ains Sama. Shaltir's off-key cry of surprise come out as something like Heinz Sama. She seemed panicked, but she remained still, because Ains was seated on her back. You are here to be my chair, understand? Yes. Ains turned from the abnormally happy Shaltir to look at Demiurge. Forgive me, Demiurge. That's how it is. I see. How remarkable. To think you would sit upon a guardian. Indeed, that is a chair which nobody can make, in other words, a proper seat for a supreme being. Ain Sama, you have surpassed my expectations once more, as is befitting of yourself. Is that so? Demiurge was beaming as he radiated his loyalty to his master. Ains had no idea why he was smiling so brightly and turned away uneasily. Then, a beautiful woman who was all smiles addressed Ains. Forgive me, Ains Sama, may I be excused for a moment? I will be back soon. What's the matter, Albedo? Never mind, it's all right. Go, then. After thanking Ains, Albedo left the room. After that, there was a feminine voice going Doriea, from outside the room, followed by a tremendous impact against the wall, which made the house shake violently. About a minute later, Albedo returned to the silent room, with her usual gentle smile on her face. I'm back, Ain Sama. Oh yes, Aura, I accidentally bumped into the wall on my way out, and there seems to be some damage. Could you fix it later? Sorry about that. All right, okay, I'll go fix it. Ain sighed, swallowing a lot of the things he wanted to say. He recalled his gaze that had nearly drifted away, and focused it on the staff which radiated an evil aura. Obviously, he would not bring the true staff of Ains Ulgaun to such a dangerous place. This was an experimental specimen, that had been built in imitation of the guild weapon. After fitting it with magic items used for special effects testing in the treasury, it looked almost like the real thing, and it made for a good decoy. The guild would disband if the guild weapon was destroyed. Therefore, he could not casually carry it with him. It was currently in the care of the guardian of the Sakura Sanctuary on the 8th floor. I've considered countermeasures against the ring being stolen as well, but I just can't find a place where I can conduct the experiment. As Ains thought about this, Shaltir's body suddenly twitched. That movement seemed like an adjustment so Ains could sit more comfortably. A bizarre sense of unease drove Ains to look at the back of Shaltir's head. She was panting. He was probably too heavy for her. Shaltir's back that he sat upon was about as slender as that of a 14-year-old girl's, and it was quite slender. To think an adult would be sitting on such a slender back. Ains was deeply convinced that he was a shamelessly cruel pervert, and had gone too far. Shaltir was an NPC made by one of his friends from the past, Peroroncino. In all likelihood, he had not expected Shaltir would have ended up being tormented like this. Since this was essentially an action which cast shame upon his former comrades, Ains believed that this was a form of punishment for himself as well. However, he now realized that he was foolish for having thought so. To think I'm actually torturing Shaltir like this, I'm beyond saving. Shaltir, is it uncomfortable? If it is, then I'll stop it. Just as Ains was about to say that, Shaltir looked back, staring at Ains. Her face was flushed and her eyes burned brightly. Not at all. In fact, I feel this is practically a reward. Every word she spoke carried the heat brewing within her body, and her glazed eyes reflected Ains' face. Her bright red tongue licked at her lips, leaving a seductive sheen. The way her body writhed ever so slightly was reminiscent of a snake. There was no mistaking this for anything other than carnal desire. Yuwa, it made him want to run away. Ains almost stood up. I can't, how could I do that? This was a punishment for Shaltir, and Shaltir's mistake had been because of Ain's miscalculation. Therefore, resisting the urge to stand up was also a way of punishing himself. Ain's crushed the rising tide of complex emotions within him. He tried his best to bear with the squirming, panting chair beneath him. Even so, he could not help but wonder how perverted did Peroncino make her anyway? Then, let's talk business. Are the lizard men as frightened as expected? Indeed, Ains Sama. That's right, just look at the lizardmen's faces. Ains laughed as he heard the guardian's responses. In truth, he could hardly tell how the lizardmen's expressions had changed. While lizardmen looked more like humans than reptiles, their facial expressions were completely different from those of humans. Really now? Then, we can consider the first part of the impression which Cocytus is going to make a success. Ains sighed in relief. He had expected at least that much from super-tier spells, which could only be used 4 times a day. Ains had gone out of his way to use one of them, the creation, and if that failed to impress, then all he could say was that it was sad. Then, Demiurge, when will you finish tallying the information on how far the lake was frozen? We are still gathering the relevant data, but the radius of freezing was larger than expected, which presents some difficulties. If possible, I hope we might be given a bit more time. Ains reached out to stop Demiurge from kneeling, and then cupped his jaw with a skeletal hand, before settling into contemplation. It would seem the spell's effective radius had been larger than he imagined, but as a magical experiment, it was quite a success. The creation was a super-tier spell that could change terrain's special effects. In Yggdrasil, one would use it to ward off the heat in hot regions, or to suppress the freezing chill of icy areas. In truth, he could have awed them into submission without using a super-tier spell. However, he had used it anyway, because he wanted to conduct an experiment on how large a spell's radius could be. In Yggdrasil, the creation could affect quite a large area, and when they tested it in Nazarick, it managed to cover the whole of the 8th floor. However, they did not know how it would fare outdoors. In Yggdrasil, it could cover one area, but he wanted to know how large that zone was in this world. It would be too much if he cast it on a plane, and it covered the entire plane. Similarly, it would be too much if it covered the entire lake. It would seem he had to be very careful when using super-tier magic. Then, Aura, what about our security net? Yes. We've dispatched the undead we borrowed from you to patrol within a 2-kilometer radius, but we haven't picked up any exceptional intrusions. Also, I've sent out some of my magical beasts who are adept at reconnaissance to patrol a 4-kilometer radius around us, but there haven't been reports of anything suspicious so far. Is that so? Our foe might make their approach by some perfectly undetectable means. Have you prepared against that yet? It'll be fine. Shaltir was helping me out, so we've also deployed undead which are good at surveillance. Very good. Aura was all smiles after Ain's praise. Her previous depression was nowhere to be seen. Still, has the person who used the world-class item on Shaltir still not made a move even after we've exposed ourselves like this? All eyes were on Ains as he asked that question again, but he was not directing it at anyone in particular. Why isn't the opposition spying on this place in Nazarick? Could it be that the enemy is keeping an eye on us with a world-class item which renders him immune to regular surveillance? Ains tilted his head in confusion after Demiurge answered with his question. I used Mammon because I thought they might use such means. If the enemy uses world-class items to spy on us, they won't be able to observe Mammon, since he also possesses a world-class item. Therefore, I've been operating on the assumption that they'll be using physical or direct observation. Well, it might be magical too, but in short, I've been assuming that they'll use more conventional methods to keep an eye on us. Ains sensed that the guardians around him seemed puzzled, and he realized that his explanation was not sufficiently clear. Well, how shall I put this? In the past, we once owned a mine that produced a rare metal. The price went through the roof because we monopolized it, so a group of people schemed to steal it from us. Back then, our opposition used Omicron Rho Omicron Beta Rho Omicron. That was one of the world-class items known as the 20. TL note, Ouroboros. Ains narrowed his eyes. He had been furious when the mine had been stolen away, but thinking back on it now, it was a good memory. It held true even as he recalled how they had been hunted and lost quite a few rare pieces of gear. What? Someone actually dared seize territory which had been claimed by the Supreme Beings? Unforgivable. Please order us to retake it at once. Ains hurriedly shifted his gaze as he heard Albedo vent her anger. He saw all the Guardians seething with hostility and murderous intent. Even the ever-serene Demiurge had a savage expression on his face. That was not all. Ains could glimpse the determination to take it back on Mare's shy and retiring face. Incidentally, Ains could not see Shaltyr's expression on account of her being a chair, but he could feel her body tense up, sending her iron will traveling up through his rump. Calm down. That's in the past. Ains raised a hand to order the Guardians to cool their heads. While it looked as though they had somewhat regained their composure, they still seemed unstable, as though magma were flowing beneath the surface. Ains decided to pick up the previous topic to change the subject. Our enemy used Omicron Rho Omicron Beta Rho Omicron, and made it impossible for us to enter the world where the mine was. They probably used that time to search for and find the mine. Once the seal was broken and we could enter the world, we found that the mine had already been taken. They had fought recklessly to retake the mine, and a great deal of the guild members had died at least once, but Ains resisted the urge to speak of that. Then, this is the point I wanted to make. While I said the world was sealed, people with world-class items could still enter that world during that time. Therefore, it should be impossible for them to spot us even if they use world-class items for surveillance. As Ains listened to the gasps of enlightenment from his subordinates, he wondered if that was really the case. It was very likely, but there was no proof that they could not be found. When 5-element progression, one of the 20, just like Omicron Rho Omicron Beta Rho Omicron, had been used, the game company sent a message to all world-class item holders. In addition to an apology, they also included an item as compensation. The apology went, "Dear holders of world-class items, you should not have been affected by changes in the world, but we have learned that keeping your data unaffected will be a very difficult task for the system. Therefore, we are making a special exception and changing your data as well." Therefore, he could not conclude that it was a perfect defense. Still, that incident had been a special case. In particular, one of the world-class items defending Nazarick had the effect of protecting against divination spells. If it could not block surveillance from world-class items, then it would be meaningless. Therefore, I feel the enemy will try to approach Mammon, but the ones who have come to him are all mothers clutching their newborn children, or adventurers. The ones who came forward begged him to touch their children's heads in the hope that they would grow up strong, or they asked to shake hands with him in the hopes of becoming stronger themselves. None of them had asked to speak with him in private. Therefore, Ains had created many openings like this on purpose, waiting for the enemy to make a move. Not giving Cocytus a world-class item was part of that plan. Ains intended to use him as bait to draw out the opposition. Their foe was fearsome precisely because he did not know their identity. That being the case, learning about their opponent would probably help them find a way to deal with them. May I share my humble opinion on this matter? What is it, Albedo? Ains Sama, as you have said just now, your aim is to divine the enemy's identity and learn more about them. In that case, is it not possible that the enemy is unwilling to get close, because they have not been exposed yet? It's fine, Albedo. I have considered that point as well. As if Ains had already assumed that his enemy was like himself, and would want to learn about their opposition. What a gaffe. What if I've been going about it all wrong from the start? Forgive me. Also, Albedo, could you please stop? Ains could not bring himself to beg that of her. He felt like he had finished a multiple-choice exam, and then, when he went through his work one more time, he found that all his answers were incorrectly shifted one space down. There's the matter of announcing that Shaltyr was defeated by a magic item. Yes. I reported as much to the guild. That was in order to avoid people fearing Mammon's strength. Spell-sealing crystals are extremely rare items, so breaking one for an experiment should be difficult. Therefore, saying that the spell-sealing crystal went out of control, that the monster was defeated through the use of a magic item, is more convincing, and it means fewer people will be on guard against Mammon. Indeed, it is as you say. It would work well against people who think spell-sealing crystals are rare items. Albedo's subtle qualification of her statement made Ains feel very uneasy. However, what if our enemy had multiple such crystals like yourself, Ains-sama? Ah, so that's what you mean. Ains put on a show of sudden realization, but he had no idea what she meant. So what if the opposition had many spell-sealing crystals? The fact was that they were very valuable items in this world. Was Albedo worried that someone would break a crystal as an experiment? Still, it did not feel like that. A sense of foreboding filled Ains' heart. He wanted Albedo to explain herself, but he resented having the pretense of knowledge he had put on just now. Come to think of it, is it really all right if I act as a ruler and decide the direction of Nazarick? What if I end up steering us into an iceberg? He wanted to run away from all of this and be done with it. Unable to bear the strain of leadership, which was only amplified when he messed up, he wept within his soul. However, he could not just run off. Since he had called himself Ains Ulgaun, he could not abandon the things, the NPCs, and the treasures of Nazarick that his friends had made. The most important thing was that he did not want to become a deadbeat father. I sometimes worry if you'll betray, abandon, or give up on me. However, that just means I have to be the Ains Ulgaun you expect and believe in. Therefore, Ains put on a confident front, the pose of a ruler with utmost confidence in himself, which he had practiced in the mirror. It's fine. However, I understand your unease. Then, Ains looked around. Albedo, share your worries with the other guardians. Ah yes. If the opposition possesses multiple crystals like you do, Ains-sama, anyone who knows their abilities will probably see through that news immediately. In other words, they will believe that Shaltir was not defeated by the crystal. Although the enemy might not know if Shaltir fought with all her strength, anyone with a world-class item would probably think that Shaltir and Mammon were of equivalent strength. Therefore, they would probably consider Mammon, a mysterious warrior who suddenly appeared in Irantal, a threat. No. In addition, the opposition might also suspect something about the link between Shaltir and Mammon, Albedo, and the Guardians. What do you think the enemy will do next? Permit me to answer, then. I feel that if our enemy intends to oppose you, Ains-sama, they will respond by spreading rumors of Mammon and the vampire being in league with each other, even if there is no basis to them, and lash out at him. Our opposition will surely not want Mammon to become more and more famous. Yua, Ains groaned internally. His original aim of going to Irantal was to gather information, but his main objective was to make the character Mammon famous, and he also wanted to get away from all this. The original plan was to turn Mammon into a great hero, and then reveal his true identity, whereupon the fame and glory he had accumulated would be transferred to Ains Ulgaun, and resound throughout the world. In addition, it would also serve to show that a former PK guild had changed its image, fighting injustice through the name of Mammon. But now, those plans were little more than soap bubbles vanishing in the wind. Oh. Demiurge, I've got a question. Wouldn't it be more damaging to spread the rumors of working with that vampire after he became famous? Or, doing so at that time would be a poor move. Once Ains-sama is sufficiently famous, people would discount those rumors as malicious gossip. That reputation must be eliminated before it grows and becomes widespread. A very astute observation, Demiurge. Ains nodded magnanimously in response to Demiurge's bow, as though he had been thinking the same thing as well. Then, I have another question. If that is the case, why has the enemy not spread these rumors yet? Demiurge raised a finger after hearing Ains' question. Firstly, the enemy has not completed their investigation into Mammon-sama. If it turned out that Mammon-sama defeated Shaltir in open combat, they would wish to avoid incurring his ire, or perhaps they would like to recruit him to their side. Secondly, he raised another finger. What if the opposition only ran into Shaltir by chance? Or what if they encountered her on the way to another objective, and they were a completely unrelated third party? That's not possible now, is it, Demiurge? How unlikely would that be? Ains said that, but in his heart, he realized that it was not impossible. He was dead set on the idea that this was an attack targeted at Shaltir, or the personnel of the great underground tomb of Nazareth. However, Shaltir had been attacked shortly after they had all been brought to this new world. Under those circumstances, it would require preternatural precision to target and attack Shaltir. Was he being overly paranoid of some hidden mastermind? Ains narrowed his eyes, the points of red light in his eye sockets. Ultimately, the lack of information remained a problem. He did not have enough manpower, and he needed more strength. In any case, the biggest problem right now is our lack of an intelligence-gathering network. Currently, he had ordered Sabas to handle this sort of work. However, there was a limit to how much intelligence that limited numbers of intelligence personnel could gather. At first, he had only wanted to learn the basic facts of this world, but they were now at a stage where such information was no longer sufficient. They could not learn what they wanted to know by going through adventurers and traders alone. It was similar to how an average citizen and a high-ranking government official had access to information of differing importance. In addition, he had no idea what sort of person could analyze the data they had gathered and determine whether or not any particular piece of information was important. Good grief. In any case, our main challenge now is a lack of information. Our hands are tied, because we have to be wary of an unseen foe. Demiurge flashed Ains a conspiratorial smile as he heard Ains mumble. In that case, why not seek a nation to support you? After a brief silence, Albedo went O to indicate that she understood. Soon, Ains made the same noise. I see, Demiurge. So that was what you meant. However, the other three guardians still looked quite confused. After that, Aura came out and asked, Ains Sama, what's this all about? As Aura asked that question, Ains gave thanks that he did not have any facial expressions. Honestly, Mayor Shaltir, do you not understand what Demiurge was trying to say? The two of them shook their heads in unison. I see. Then it can't be helped. Tell them, Demiurge. Yes, I understand. Now then, everyone. Ains Sama is worried about the existence of a hidden, powerful enemy. I feel that if we encounter said enemy, and they are hostile to us, we need to have some kind of leverage that we can use during negotiations. Sensei, I don't get it. That look appeared on the faces of 3 students and 1 adult. Demiurge Sensei seemed to realize that his explanation was too complicated and decided to continue explaining after dumbing himself down to match the students. What would you do if Ains Sama was dominated by some world-class item? I'd kill the bastard who did it. No, that's not what I mean, Aura. What I'm trying to say is, don't you think the very fact that being mind-controlled would count as an alibi? The fact is that there are people out there who really can dominate their opposition with world-class items, so we can convincingly say that Ains Sama was controlled by a world-class item. Assistant Teacher Albedo supplemented Head Teacher Demiurge's lecture. In other words, by pretending to support another country, we have an excuse for any action which Nazareth takes. By saying that we were ordered to do so by that country, and we had no choice but to obey, we could use that to deflect blame from ourselves, assuming there was an enemy on our level. Also, if the other party does not want an open conflict, they will have no choice but to bear with it. I see, so even if someone wasn't happy with what we did, as long as we had a good reason, we could drag a third party into becoming an ally. So that's what it is, as expected of Ains Sama. Ains reached out and stroked the head of Shaltir the chair. It was like a mob boss stroking a Siamese cat. Demiurge came up with that scheme, not me, so your thanks should go to him. No, it's not true. It would seem you already came to the same answer, Ains Sama. It feels like I'm taking credit for your hard work. Sorry about that. Also, I believe it will be easier to obtain information if we support another country. A country would probably have the intelligence gathering network that they were struggling to build. That being the case, Infiltrating them with Nazaryk's people ought to be much better for gathering usable information.